I'll start. Should I start?
Yeah.
Hello, I'm Nat.
I'm Rachel.
That's Rachel. Today we're going to be discussing what makes a genre comparing urban fantasy and paranormal romance. I've got a few points that we're going to talk about, and then it's going to be quite interactive. So if people have got ideas, if they've got a thought on something that comes out, throw it out there. It's absolutely fine. We're looking just for sort of discourse and chatting about it. These two genres are really interesting, but quite heavily linked together. So today's going to be what makes urban fantasy and what makes paranormal romance. I will start off with the first section, which is actually about Cassie and Dory's stories. They're regularly misplaced in the paranormal romance section. In fact, the first three, I believe, were actually marketed as paranormal romance. But Karen has always stipulated that the series is urban fantasy. So really, we're going to start with looking at what makes them similar. So why have they been misplaced in paranormal romance? The obvious thing is they are both set in a modern, sort of as-like magic world. That magic world obviously contains anything from, it can be everything and anything from witches, vampires, shifters, fae. The key is, unlike fantasy, these could be set in our own world.
I do think that it's called urban fantasy. We mostly see them like set in cities instead of like out on a farm somewhere.
Yeah. I'm sure it probably would be if it was in a farm, but as a rule, it tends to be in towns and cities, yes.
Because is there like an urban fantasy?
I'm sure there's probably one.
The Sookie Stackhouse was more rural than anything else, and I would call that urban fantasy.
Okay.
Yeah. I suppose the difference is that the nearby city also has the vampires in them, so you could argue that it's urban because it's a modern setting that has a lot of urban areas where they would likely congregate. So that's their big kind of in common. Are you all having cake?
Stop talking about cake! You're just distracting me!
I'm going to eat a curry later, so I will pretend I'm not eating cake.
We want to talk about werewolf penis, not cake.
It's Colin away. He's not nearby, is he?
He's got his headphones on, he's in the other room.
I won't feel so guilty about that. So some of the other common themes. Both genres are predominantly written and consumed by women. There are notable exceptions. There are obviously in everything. But this means that they tend to have women-led themes. The protagonists are almost always female. I've also put down that they can be considered female wish fulfillment to an extent. They're usually strong, capable women with hot, interesting men, and with strong romantic plot lines.
And they're straight.
And this, as a rule, yep. So some good examples of what I would consider contemporary urban fantasy is obviously the Transverse, the Kate Daniels series by Eleanor Andrews, the Hollows series by Kim Harrison, Mercy Thompson series by Patricia Briggs, and the October Day series by Shauna Maguire. And also the early books, at least, the Anita Blake books by Laurel K. Hamilton, which is, if you look at the first couple of books, they're dated back to the 90s, so they were certainly one of the big forerunners of urban fantasy. Not the first series, but certainly one of the earliest big series that got very, very popular.
I've looked like in and out of that time frame of urban fantasy, and I think that people are like, then they call her the grandmother of the genre. That's pretty true. It's not like a myth or anything.
She was my first foray into urban fantasy, definitely. I was recommended the series by a friend at university. That was 1999. And I think the first 7 or 8 were out by then. The first 8 do.
Yeah, I know that I was introduced into this series when it was like heavily, definitely paranormal romance. And then I went back and got hooked by the urban fantasy.
I feel like they're 2 separate series now.
Yeah.
I think once you get book 9 separates the 2 into 2 separate series. So you've got an urban fantasy series for the first 9 books and then a paranormal romance, becoming a reverse harem paranormal romance in the later books. There's a lot there. I love reverse harem, but it has to start that way for me to love it. And I felt like she just she went, yeah, this is me, so I'm just going to drag all these into my books, which is exactly what she did because she's poly, so.
Yeah, it's a self-insert, so it went with the self.
Anita's the ultimate Mary Sue. There's no 2 words about it. Anita's a Mary Sue.
You could talk about this one just in a panel forever, just that series.
But yeah, she even looks like Laurel K. Hamilton, like the description.
I've met her a couple times and she looks, that's her in her book.
So, well, as on the other hand, I've got some really good examples of paranormal romance. By its, obviously, paranormal romance is, by its name, a romance genre. The big thing that sets it out from urban fantasy is that the romance is supposed to be front and centre of the novel. So some really good examples, and there's some of these you probably won't have heard of because they're indie authors, and some of them are bigger authors. So there's the Kit Davenport series by Tate James. She's an indie author. She's great, by the way. She does a lot of stuff. She's a really good author. She's an Australian author. The Demigods of San Francisco series by K.F. Breen. K.F. Breen's a really big romance author in general, but that's her big paranormal romance series. Now, I've also put Mary Gentry, the other Laurel K. Hamilton series, as paranormal romance. That was poly from the get-go. There was never any attempt to make it anything but a romance story, really. And she starts with like 6 boyfriends. It just goes up. And then there's sort of some smaller ones. The Lazy Girl's Guide to Magic by Helen Harper is an entirely witch-based one, which I like because it's not a kitchen sink world. It's just witches. But it's very funny. I quite recommend that one. And we've also got the Side Changeling series by Nalini Singh. That's one of Rachel's recommendations. I've never read this.
The one that I know the best with Immortals After Dark. Crap, what's the name? The author's name, I don't remember right now.
I've heard of it, but I've never read it.
It starts with The Hunger Like No Other by Cressley Cole. It's debatably good. Yeah.
I've got a lot of recommendations. I will put them in a spreadsheet. I will write them all down.
Yeah, I could name like 10 more urban fantasy, but I only know like a couple PNR.
There's some really good examples out there that are effectively, they are urban fantasy, but with just a stronger romance underlying. One thing that we were mentioning in a recent chat, me and Rachel, is that you will have to be aware of the fact that the sex scenes are very graphic now. There's they're good books, but if you're looking for Fade to Black, you are probably not going to get it in this genre anymore. 20 years ago, probably. Now,
no,
it's
it's
not happening. That is happening.
Every inch is detailed.
And so much so, sometimes it's like, I don't know if I can read this in public.
I don't know. I kind of go in and out of like whether I like that or not, just because like with Karen Chance's stuff, she said before that like the way she keeps it interesting to write and read, I think, is why they're so funny. She intentionally adds that humor, but like not everyone does that. So like a lot of it is just straightforward sex, and it's just like, you know, sex is just kind of the same. You know what I mean? Different holes maybe, but it's all kind of the same after a while. Like, I'm glad that you're having fun, but like, I'm just, you know, I'm gonna skip ahead a page or two this time.
Fair enough. So I think that's a good thing about it, though. You can always skip through a scene if it's like, oh, this is the fourth one in a row. Let's just skip to the next bit of action, please. I get it. You really like each other.
Yeah, like there was a reason why I got into the whole like PNR stuff when I was like a teenager, but now I kind of skip ahead.
It's fair enough. And some of the groups I'm on that have these kind of books in, these women are thirsty. There's some thirsty women out there. There really are. I was got off the point there a bit. Oh yeah, the other point I was making was obviously with PNR being a romance genre, the romance is both the point and also the happy ever after is the point. It's sort of an unwritten rule that there's a happy ever after in romance of any kind. Some dark romance doesn't have a happy ever after, but as a rule, it does tend to be that way, which I don't think is a requirement of urban fantasy. They tend to, but it's not a requirement.
I've actually seen in like little writers' workshops that the happy ending is like required. Like they say most, like all readers expect that happy ending, so you better include it, or like you're gonna have a lot of really unhappy people. But I don't know about the urban fantasy, but the romance definitely, yeah.
I think it's part of why people read romance. I think it's a large part of why people read romance, that people are getting their happy ever after, even if there's bad things happening first. At least you get that. It's got a fluffy ending, if maybe not a fluffy beginning or middle. I was saying, so the big overlap between the two genres comes with the world building from Paranormal Romance. With good stories, it can feel like the romance is a subplot. The stronger the world building, the stronger the characters, it can feel like urban fantasy with the strong romance instead. Some novels and series, even with a decent story, still feel PNR because there isn't an overlap of couples. The Black Dagger Brotherhood is a really good example of this. It's a different couple every time, and while the characters are still there in the background of the overall arc, they are not seen again. So it feels like Paranormal Romance because each couple gets its own book and there's an obvious romantic arc to each one while they're trying to kill these people that smell like baby powder. That's all I can remember about the bad guys from the Black Dagger Brotherhood. They used to be human and they smell like baby powder.
They're like all white, like albinos too.
Yeah, it's really weird. The Dark Hunter World by Sherilyn Kenyon is the same as well. It's different every time. I don't have a lot of experience with this one, but I know they definitely fall into that category of somebody different every time. That has an obvious urban fantasy feel to it. We've got extra guests. I've excluded any examples of what I would think of as strict, old-fashioned PNR romance. So those ones that are essentially just a romance, it's a man and a woman getting together, and the only difference is he's a vampire. Those are what I would consider a really old-fashioned version of Paranormal Romance, and it's kind of fallen out of favour in recent years. The full world building does seem to have become a bit more popular. There's an aside here that I believe is Rachel's right after this point.
Yeah, basically, like, you don't, where there's different couples or main characters in PNR, it's much more rare in urban fantasy. Like, they exist. Like, I know of the Women of the Otherworld series. Well, they'll like have reoccurring characters, but I think of the like 12 books overall, there's like 6 or 5 different main characters throughout. And yeah, that the PNR, like the longer series, they all have like this big conflict, like holding them together, like you said with the bad guys in Black Dagger Brotherhood. Like, they were the bad guys and they were like an organization that the people had to take down, like the whole conflict. Or like Side Changeling series has this concept called the silence, and then the Psys live in the silence, and it's like the cause of all the evil in the world. Like, there's this overarching thing that like brings the whole series together too. So like there's plot, but again, the romance is really important. But I think like when there's, I think that a series is weaker if it doesn't have that like big world building aspect to it. I think people are way more impressed with the series when it's all stitched together like that.
Definitely. And there is that feeling of there's several authors who are writing what I would consider to have been urban fantasy 5 years ago, 10 years ago, and it's now firmly in paranormal romance. And sometimes that can be as little as it's an unusual pairing, or it's just a case of, is it because paranormal romance is just a little bit more popular? One big aspect at the moment is the idea that urban fantasy is on a downturn. It's less popular. Existing series appear to still be getting sales, but new series aren't getting traction. It's quite common in fiction for there to be trends, up and downward trends in sales, and people are always shifting to what's new. But romance as a whole is a very strong area. It's a several $1 billion a year.
No, that's not going down anytime soon.
It's not going down anytime soon. So it seems like quite a lot of people who may have sat under urban fantasy years ago are much more likely to sit under paranormal romance because it's just more popular. There's also a general feel. Is it a bit more of a serious genre, urban fantasy? Or do people assume it's more serious because there isn't an obvious romance element? There are definitely urban fantasy series without any romance or with very minimal romance in them. But I don't know that many.
So, I can't even think of one.
I can't think of one. I know I was on a page the other day that is urban fantasy based, and people were asking for examples because they were ace and they were looking for examples where there was no romance. And they did get a handful of examples, none of which interested me, or I'd heard of. But they exist.
I wonder if those are like longer series, if they're just like a single book or like a trilogy or something. Like, would a book with no romance last like 8, 9 books? I don't know. It's a question I'm throwing out.
I suppose it depends on the conflict within it and how interesting the characters are. Yeah. I suppose if you could concentrate on other types of relationships to make the book interesting, I suppose. But
yeah, again, I can't really, that's just my personal, like, I like romance. I like reading romance. Not that I wouldn't read something without it, but just what I'm drawn to. But like, I can think of more with like a switch out romantic lead than I can no romance at all.
I'd say I don't think I've ever read one without one, even if it's not the largest part of the plot, even if it's only for a couple of books and the rest of it doesn't. Oh, Midnight Mayor. Okay.
Is that a no romance one? Oh, cool. Oh, we have an answer.
Yeah, well, there we go. So they do exist. They're out there. Just have to go searching
I think
for them.
the writer said that her character is too busy to have romance.
Oh, that's nice. That's cool.
Okay.
Actually, like, not quite related to the genre, but I did see on Twitter a young adult author saying, like, she regrets adding the romance into her story because, one, she barely even, like, remembers it when people bring it up, and two, like, she thinks that the character had way too much going on for her to also have a romance. So, like, in retrospect, she wished she hadn't added it. Yeah, that's true. And, like, Nat and I were talking, and, like, neither of us have really read that many male-centered books anyway. I think I've read, like, 3, 2 of which I didn't get past the first book, and then the third one was the Jim Butcher one that I didn't really like, so.
He gets, the next point is actually going to be sexism within.
Yeah, sorry, I jumped ahead.
So you've led in really nicely there. Urban fantasy is heavily female-based, but some of the biggest recommendations are the men in urban fantasy. You ask for recommendations, everyone says Jim Butcher, everyone says the Dresden Files, everyone. Rivers of London is another really good example by Ben Aronovich. It's actually a great story. And it's really different to a lot of urban fantasy. But they get mentioned a lot. There's also another one, which I can't remember off the top of my head, but it gets Iron Druid, I want to say, something like that. And that gets mentioned all the time. And when you start asking for female-led ones, they're like, oh, Kate Daniels, I guess. And people love Kate Daniels. People love Kate Daniels, and the series is great. It's very different to a lot of other series, but it is great. And in fact, I would probably have put it almost in PNR because the romance is a huge part of it.
Oh, yeah.
It's massive. And I didn't like the end of the last book, but anyway.
It is massive.
It is. And their other series, I think, are Paranormal Romance. The one that's ongoing at the moment is definitely romance-led. So while this one sits in urban fantasy, I believe it is probably the only series of theirs that does. And it's probably because Kate's just a badass, to be honest.
Yeah.
I think that's why she's popular. But it's a good series. If you're interested, it's a completed series as well. It's 10 books. So
and I know that we definitely talked about this in other cons, and there's definitely like an argument of itself in here, but is like Kate is more of a masculine character, and that may be why she's mentioned so often. I mean, when you see people's like, oh, why do you prefer Dory over Cassie? It's because Dory is less girly or something, you know?
That does come up a lot. I think a lot of male readers prefer Dory's outlook.
And like, I know Mercy Thompson doesn't even really, like, she's an actual mechanic. Like, she spends all her day in the guts of cars, covered in grease, and never wears makeup. That's a more masculine woman. And she is like constantly in like bestsellers lists. And she's like freaking 12 books into the series. So it's kind of impressive.
Got another one in my book series in the couple that I've started, and now I can't remember the main character's name. She's part native and she's a shifter.
Oh, Faith Hunter is the author.
Yes, Jane Yellowrock. Is that it? That's really good, but again, she's very strong.
Oh, yeah. Like, I know that there's times where she like dresses up to be girly, but her whole thing is she's a vampire hunter and she's badass, head to toe, covered in leather, like 1,000 knives strapped to her. Like, I'm gonna go murder some people, you know, like very like Blade. She's not like a pretty girl in a sundress like Cassie in the last book, going on a date with her boyfriend, trying to be pretty.
Yeah, there is a general idea sometimes in urban fantasy that some people think that the romance cheapens the story. It doesn't. Um, and we were saying earlier that there is romance within the male-led stories. Mm-hmm. It's just that guys see it from their perspective. It's from a male view. Equivalent series by female authors probably have as much or less romance in them than these series, but get looked down on. I think Toby Day is a really good example of that. Toby actually is the complete opposite. One of her romances is killed off in exactly the same way as in the Jim Butcher, but her eventual long-term love interest doesn't even start until book 6. So, and then I think it's all Fade to Black. I'm fairly sure it's all Fade to Black, or as close as, or it's very mild anyway. And so the idea of it being different in male-led ones purely has got to just be down to the gaze. It can't be. There are plenty of female-led books where they're not hung up on the romance. And it just seems that the female-led stories tend to be placed in paranormal romance if the romance is strong, even if it's not the main focus, if just a subplot. Whereas you'd never see that with a male-led book. It would always be urban fantasy. The Dresden Files would never end up in paranormal romance. Never. But I could see any of the ones that we've mentioned that we consider urban fantasy being marketed that way. And I think a lot of it must be to appeal to audiences because there's just more in the romance world. Yeah. So we've got a few questions. I mean, the two genres are heavily linked. It can be down to where it lies can be up to a reader to decide. It could be up to a marketer to decide. It could just be up to the author to decide. So we've got some questions. Do you think urban fantasy is dying? And is paranormal romance on the rise?
I can't talk to paranormal romance on the rise. I don't seek those out necessarily. If it crosses over, great, but I'm not just like, I think that urban fantasy dying is a self-fulfilling prophecy. Somebody has decided this is what's happening and they're making it so. Because the quality of all of the books hasn't really gone down. All of the urban fantasy I can think of, their book 10 is as good as book 1, especially if they have an overarching plot. I think it's harder to get new series out there, and a lot of the people are going indie because of that, but they still get sales. So I don't know. I don't know new paranormal romance authors necessarily that I've seen, but again, I haven't been seeking them out either.
There's a lot.
I'm sure.
Yeah, there's a lot coming out. They're using, one of the things I've noticed is Facebook groups is a really great place for them to market. There's a lot going on in them. They're busy and there's a lot of people in them. So you'll get like 10 or 15 posts a day from new authors throwing their books out there. But it's also a great place to go for like what's really good, because you can see what's being continually recommended to people. You're like, that's a good book because it keeps getting recommended, so it's going on my to be read.
I need to do that because I'm keep reading the same 3 authors, and Jim Butcher has pissed me off, so I'm not reading him. Kim Harrison has pissed me off, so I'm like, I'm out. I'm out. I'm not reading the last 2 Jim Butcher books. I am so mad about that, but that's another story.
That's fair enough. Sometimes you have to. I didn't read the last Suki Sakas book. I refused to.
Neither have
I was spoiled for what happened, and I was like, nope, not reading it.
Did
nope.
she end up
so
with,
I didn't.
I think I was spoiled too.
Yeah. How it ended was just like, what was the point of those 13 books? It was awful. Don't recommend it. And Eric's one of my favourite male characters. It was awful.
I wonder if
So I get it. I get losing interest in a series, definitely.
I liked the ending of the Sookie books. She went with the one that I shipped her with, so I was happy. I don't like vampires, though. I like stories with vampires, but I don't like vampires.
I wondered if she just like started to hate the vampires after like the HBO thing, which the HBO series was successful and interesting, but it just wasn't the books, really.
Yeah, series 1 wasn't too bad, and then it just varied wildly after that. It just went, no, we're just throwing the books out. So, yeah, I didn't even finish the TV series.
I haven't finished it either.
I got bored at series 3.
One thing that I wanted to say and kind of forgot before we got to the question was just like a general, like, even if publishers are maybe dropping the more like adult urban fantasy, I think that young adult urban fantasy is actually thriving. I mean, my only real guide to that is from the Goodreads Awards, and like consistently, like they're always high rated. Like Cassandra Clare stuff is always getting awards on there. So another question to ask, I guess, is like maybe it's just shifting down in age. Like people who are coming into adulthood are finding the genre, and it's getting a new focus there.
That could definitely be the case. I'm sure some people grow out of urban fantasy stuff. I don't know why, but I'm sure some people do. Or if it's just...
I actually wonder, like, maybe we could do a poll somewhere, but like what age people get into urban fantasy, because I know I was a teenager when I got into it, and it was kind of because of the sex. Not gonna lie. So we have a whole new crop of horny teens.
It's a good point. Vampire novels in general attract teenagers. There's that kind of living young forever, isn't there? But yeah, like I always like to say, I liked vampires before they were cool.
I got into Twilight before it exploded, and I got mad when it exploded because everyone liked it, and I wanted to be cool, and it wasn't anymore.
It was like a bit like, I liked vampires before Twilight.
Right? there was a popular mean girl. I wore a Twilight shirt, and then she was like, "Oh, I love those books," and it killed me in my soul.
I think I was a bit too old for Twilight. I think I was in my mid-20s, and Chris bought me them all. I read them, yeah. But I read them, you know. Someone bought me them, so I read them.
I guess those are considered more traditional. Are they romance? Are they PNR? Oh my God, are they PNR?
Yeah. I suppose they're a PNR, aren't they?
Whoa! They shook my world.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of Cassandra Clare at all. I don't know why she's so popular. Don't like her. Don't like her.
Again, one of those things where they came out when I was a teen, and I liked them as a teen, and then I read them later, and I was like, what is this? This is so bad.
I think it's the writing style. I don't like her writing style. I'm sure it's really interesting, but I started reading the first of the Mortal Instruments books, and I was like, no, this is not for me at all.
You don't come back. You don't come back from making your main love interest possibly siblings. You
That's
don't
my
come back
favorite
from that.
part. That's my favorite part. That's what I was like, this is getting good. This is getting good. They weren't good. You knew they weren't, though. But it was like, oh, they're so conflicted and tortured.
You didn't. I was stupid. I was like, maybe they are, but I still want them to kiss.
We've all done that.
I have a theory that Marvel has killed off not paranormal romance, urban fantasy, because I rather thought urban fantasy was girls' comics. Basically, you know, we're not allowed to read comics because we're girls. Comics are for boys. I'm paraphrasing. That's not what I actually think.
Can you speak up?
But suddenly we've got Marvel, and everybody watches the Avengers. So now it's okay.
Oh, yeah.
You had to give a bit as well. You know, the comics world basically had to give a bit. But in those times when girls didn't read comics, play computer games, that's when urban fantasy took off.
Mm.
So I don't know, maybe it's now competing with a bit more sort of mainstream stuff that everybody's allowed to watch.
That's a possibility. There's more things that might attract somebody who's a bit on the geeky side. So it's sort of falling away in regards to that. Interesting point.
Yeah, honestly, Marvel took over you can see my room here. It took over my fandoms. Like, I was a super Star Wars nerd. I met my husband at a Star Wars convention, and Marvel took over everything. I can see that. Well, Robert Downey kind of did it for me, but
You love Robert.
yes, I am Iron Man. Bracelet says so.
Oh, the bracelet says so. Oh, that's so cute. I want one of them.
I can see that. Yeah.
Let's see if we've got any more questions. Oh, here we go. Does male-led urban fantasy get a leg up, even though women are the major contributors? Do we believe in that?
I mean, Dresden Files. Yeah, and well, they're not even called urban fantasy. They'll call them fantasy or sci-fi. They don't get that extra adjective. English is not my strong suit. Adjective in the beginning?
Yeah.
It's fantasy. Or we don't have to, yeah. That said, the male urban fantasy authors I read, I really, really like. But I think they're more, I'm looking at my bookshelf, and the ones that are in hardcover are the male ones.
There are exceptions, obviously. Laurel K. Hamilton's a really good exception.
True.
She might be questionable now, but
Still selling.
she's still selling. I'm quite what is it, 20, 26 books? Ridiculous like that.
It's been like 30 years. Anita is still like 26. She's aged like 2 years and 30 years.
I think the last couple of books she did have quite a big jump. She had a couple of years jump.
Oh.
And she desperately started trying to bring, I know somebody said that the most recent one, there isn't actually any sex in it. But, and this is a big but, 90% of her books are talking about her relationships. And while it's lovely that she's talking about her relationships with her 900 boyfriends, and I'm really glad her communication levels are good, I don't actually want to read about it all that much. I read one where they were supposed to go to Ireland. The whole point of it was going to Ireland. They didn't leave to go to Ireland until halfway through the book.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm halfway through the book and you're still sat in a room chatting. Like, are you going to Ireland or what? And all the action was in the last 20 minutes. It was like,
I remember you saying that before, actually.
it drives me bonkers.
It's seared into my brain.
It's seriously right because it drove me mad. She also kills off characters. She killed off a character so blasé, it was unbelievable.
If we're going to go on an Anita Blake tangent, can I just say that when everybody is like, I like the first books better, or I like the second books better, can I just sweepingly say all of them suck? They're all badly written.
They're not well written. They're not, actually. When you look back, the editing's not great either. And, well, she was able to go without an editor after about book 12, I think, and that completely destroyed it. I mean, they were bad before, but without one, she just repeats herself constantly.
Mm-hmm.
All of the guys seemed like Reverse Harem, fine, but none of these guys are doing it for me. Especially the first one. He was like the vampire with the dark, beautiful hair.
Jean-Claude.
The comic artist they got to do the first comics. I think it's gorgeous art. You don't like those, Dawn? You didn't like the comics? Oh.
I mean, I didn't either, but like,
I thought they were pretty.
their own, you know.
I liked Jean-Claude, but to be fair, I was 20 at the time.
I was Team Richard. And then, well, not anymore because he's got his own problems, but I was Team Richard at the time.
I felt so bad. I felt so bad reading them back with Richard because he starts off just like this sweet dude, this sweet like middle school science teacher who's kind of like a gorgeous freaking heartthrob, and then like she just twists him to this mean thing because everybody who hangs around Anita Blake long enough turns into, when you're around someone that toxic, you become toxic. Anita poisoned him.
So yeah.
They turned him back again, so like he's really good now, but like he's not in a harem. They're just like mates.
Oh, so they're not, they're just friends now? Good. Good for him. He got out of that.
Yeah, he's got a girlfriend now and everything, he's happy.
Good for him.
I think she felt forced to give him a happy ever after. I think she was a bit like, oh, people liked him. Guess I should maybe get him a girl.
I remember who I ship her with Edward because they're both soulless monsters.
Yeah. Or Olaf. Although apparently in the last book Olaf was in it and there was a whole Olaf thing that came up quite a lot, but I haven't read it, so I don't know what happens. But there's arguments that she may end up with Olaf, and I was a bit like, the guy who wanted to kill people with her, who was a serial killer.
That's perfect for her. She should do that. She loves killing. Just
to be fair, one of the guys in her harem is a psychopath. So.
Okay.
So
we started talking about like male led, but like I didn't really have anything to add because I've only read the Jim Butcher series. And I'm forgetting the main character's name, Dresden.
Yeah. I'm on Reddit and I don't go on it much anymore, but I joined their urban fantasy thing to see what it was, to get some ideas for new urban fantasy, and the only ones they talk about are the male-led ones. And there was a post raised. I mean, to be fair, Reddit is heavily male, but there's a post raised about, you know, what do people think about it being a female-led genre, and there were men there going, it's not. And they were listing off all the series they've read, and that was like all the male series. I was like, yeah, but there's no others. You've read them all? And there's 7,000 women protagonists out there that you've not even touched. I don't read women heroes.
I do actually recognize Simon Green, like that name. Like I've seen it around, but I haven't read it.
He has two main series. The Night Sider is my favorite, and he also, what's his other one?
I've heard of that, yeah.
The Man with the Golden Torque, and I can't remember what those are called, but they cross over a little bit. But personally, the Night Side is one of the best examples of world building and an alternate Earth. Like it's here, but it's like a side dimension almost. It is wickedly cool. He has a touch of romance in there, but not until the end. He's just a dude. It's really cool. Nobody I know has read that, and I want to talk about it with people so bad.
I'll read it. We'll chat.
Yeah, I'll get to it.
It's based in London and Soho. So I don't know.
I'm sure I've heard of it a few times, so I'll definitely go digging it up.
I did, but a long time ago now, actually. So I can't remember what it happened. Well,
maybe.
But it does drive me bonkers. I'm in a quite a few Facebook groups for sort of, and they are quite male dominated. And every now and again, somebody says, "Oh, I've read." A man says, "Oh, I've read Jim Butcher. It's really good. Anybody recommend any more?" And it's just the same 5 authors, and then it stops. You say, you do know there's quite a few. I'm quite genuine, actually. They don't say, "Oh, I don't read books with me." They don't know they exist. Just don't know. I think there are these same 5 books. That's about it, basically. And you say, you do know it's considered a women's genre. You just don't know about the other books. It's so weird. So weird.
It's a very strange thing to be in a group.
Yeah, that's weird because like I feel like I'm in the completely opposite bubble.
Oh yeah, so was I until I was like in the, and it's like what?
I'm like, oh, I can name off like 10 in one go of just like women written, even if it's Alana Andrews, which is technically like not
A
quite
couple.
whatever,
Yeah.
but you know, like, but
I think she
them
does
to
most of the
actually-
writing. Actually, I think she does do most of the writing in that. I think it counts.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
get
like when I go, I'm in a Facebook group, urban fantasy Facebook group, and the ones that brought up the most, like you said, like it's all just kind of the same names over and over again.
Does
Yeah.
George R.R. Martin count as like a
That would be high fantasy.
high
Yeah.
fantasy?
Yeah, it tends to go with high fantasy. Although it does get mentioned sometimes.
I was gonna say, because the only ones I really like when I read George R.R. Martin are like when he's writing the women character. Like that's the only part of the story that really interests me, and like even watching it, I only really care when Arya's on the screen. And but you know, Jon Snow, but he's such a pretty boy that he's kind of like a woman. I enjoyed his parts.
Neil Gaiman, there's another dude.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, like Neverwhere's amazing, to be fair.
Yeah, I like that one a lot.
Romans.
And American Gods, I at least saw the show and liked it. Shadow is fucking beautiful. Shadow, like, just turn the TV, like, mute it and just stare at him. That's all I need.
The 90s TV series of Neverwhere, the BBC did. It was actually before the novel. And the guy who plays the Marquis de Carabas is beautiful. Absolutely gorgeous. Love him. He's my favourite character in any of his books. I love the Marquis. Love him. Anyway.
Yeah, I just have Goodreads open and I'm looking at names of like, oh yeah, that one. Like, crap, where was it? Oh, there's Rivers of London and Janine
London is
Frost,
good.
Halfway to the Grave, Night Huntress series. This is very popular PNR.
I liked that one.
Oh, I didn't. It was vampires.
I didn't really like Bones, but I liked the other characters. But Bones is the male lead, so if you don't like him, it's hard to like the book. But
I liked the first part before they really get together. They go out of their way to like make him a really like charming dude when she starts being attracted to him. But in the first like 30 pages, he's just this weird guy. And he's way more fun that way. Just this weird freaking vampire hanging out by himself in a cave, talking to ghosts and like doing dumb shit. And he's like a mercenary. I don't know. He was way more interesting until they made him like a dashing dude who's always doing like good things. And he seems bad, but he's got a good heart, like snore. I sound like such a butthead, but I swear there are things that I actually like.
Question: does anybody know of a series that has a more feminine female lead aside from Cassie? Because I like the tough, chicks as much as anyone, but it'd be nice to see a girly girl here and there.
There's some PNR. There's some indie authors in PNR that do them.
I mean, like just straightforward urban fantasy. No, it's definitely like tougher. Like Dory is the cool one. But if you go into like the chicklet wing, there's definitely more, I guess, Cassie like. But then they're also like shallow and less like kind.
What I like about Cassie, she's so different to a lot of heroines.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's really, yeah.
You get glimpses into her mental issues without it being the focus of the story constantly too. So like she's lonely and it works within the story rather than the story being about her loneliness. And otherwise it's like the driving force is their mental issues. I appreciate that. And she seems like an introvert to me, which I appreciate for the obvious reasons. I don't know that one. Cozy Paranormal Detectives?
Oh,
No, it's not the name of a series, but if you like
cozy mysteries or cozy
cozy mysteries, cozy detectives, they've gone paranormal now.
Yeah.
There's a
I've
lot
heard
of, whiitch paranormal detective mysteries, basically. They're really detective stories, they're really mystery stories, but with witches.
I've definitely seen a lot more of those on Kindle than I don't know if I've ever seen really in like a bookstore. But like when I'm looking for a free Kindle story, they're like always there. Cozy mystery.
Yeah, they run to series now. They've got whatever. But I quite like it, and I just was like, oh, okay, now we're doing this too. Ooh, this might be fun.
It's great how it's branched off into so many subgenres.
They're a lot more feminine. The women in that are usually quite. They're not.
Yeah, they're a bit typical romance heroine, actually, in that sense, but with like a paranormal undertone.
I haven't really looked into that genre that much, but what I know is it's usually like includes like bakery and like recipes, and I think that definitely makes it more feminine, like skewed.
Yeah. They're always, I mean, because it's the sort of, lady detective kind of thing.
Yeah.
So they're always the cupcake store owner, or the bookstore owner, or whatever. I mean, it's fun. Yeah.
I can't remember the name of one of this book series, but it was like a really petite, curvy girl, like vampire hunter or something, and she like had, I designed this bra made of Kevlar in case anyone tries to stake me, and it was just like super femmy, but it was super played for laughs, I feel like. So it wasn't like, it was funny, but
Wouldn't that just hurt your boobs? Like, wouldn't they be so heavy in that?
I guess she was a vampire, so maybe she was.
Oh, okay.
I don't know. But yeah, it was so that people couldn't stake her. It was a special bra.
That's so funny.
That's clever. Stab that.
That's the only thing I remember from the book series. I can't remember the name, the author.
That's very memorable.
Cassie would do that, though. I reckon Cassie would get her own underwear line. Yeah.
And then she'd just forget to wear it.
Well, probably, but
You imagine,
she'd have already, and then be naked when she needed it.
We should do a tally sometime of the time she's naked versus clothed. See if they even out.
Wait, do we count her wearing only Pritkin's t-shirt as naked or clothed because she had no underwear on?
No underwear we should go with.
She didn't have any bottoms at all.
You're right.
It wasn't commando. There was nothing.
Why wouldn't you wear your dirty underwear? I'm sorry, I'd rather wear dirty underwear than no underwear.
He's also not that much taller than her. He's only a couple of inches taller than her, really. So that t-shirt would not have gone that far down. I was a bit like, did that even cover your bum?
Yeah.
What are you doing?
Her and Pritkin's height difference is about me and my husband, and we almost see eye to eye. His shirts are not.
At that point, wear his pants. He has to have a belt.
Yeah.
A belt, Cassie? What are you doing?
Borrow some boxers. I do that all the time. Well, I'm home.
Your dick isn't gonna fall out, Cassie. Wear the boxers.
Wait. He always goes commandos. He wouldn't have boxers.
Oh my God, that's right.
Oh, yeah.
Never mind.
Yes, socks, but no pants. I love Prickett. Not as much as Rose's. What did I miss on the chat?
Cassie's just laying there.
Ignorance never come off.
Look, if Merlin can't get these off, I don't know how I'm going to get them off.
That's a brilliant idea.
Magic word. She
The
forgets.
mention of Kitty. Not good. Crap, I forget her last name.
Norfolk?
Yes, I want that.
Kitty N.
Good series.
Who's that by? Does anyone know?
Carrie Vaughn.
I
The werewolf.
liked that until Kitty turned into the Mary Sue, who could never do anything wrong. Like, she would mess up, but it's all fine and dandy. She could do everything. I'm just like, I like characters who have flaws because it feels more realistic. I mean, they can win. I like them when they win, but I don't want to be perfect.
Yeah.
I stopped reading hers.
I got mad because the author kept bringing in like gods from other countries for her to just spontaneously meet in like random cities, and they're just like, I mean, from my cursory knowledge from like the myths course I took in college, I'm looking at it like, why are you doing that, white lady? Stop doing that, white lady. It's not even close to what I know. And I took a course. It kind of drove me crazy.
Does Kitty end up with Cormac?
No.
But I'm not reading it.
Yeah, she's like, she ends up with her lawyer. Spoilers. But she, every time she sees Cormac, he's like in jail for a little while, but when he comes back, every time she sees him, she like brings up, oh, we almost had a thing, and there's still that tension there. And it's like, girl, you're married.
Wasn't his name Ben or something then?
Yeah.
I was hoping he'd die. But yeah.
I know he was kind of boring. But... Oh, he's his cousin. Yeah. He does have his own series. Yeah, I think it's still going. She like ended Kitty's series and then picked up Cormac's because he like got possessed in prison or something. I'm giving everything away. Maybe I should stop talking.
Okay, I'd like to know a little bit about what's coming.
I read the epilogue first, just in case.
Oh, you do, don't you? I couldn't do that. I don't think I could do that.
I need to know if I need to set myself up for happy or depressing as shit. I need to know that going in, which is why on Endgame, I found out spoilers about my dude because I needed to know if this was a good experience or if I was going to leave pissed the fuck off. And guess what? Pissed the fuck off. The only Tony Stark movie I haven't seen very many times. I saw it twice because I had to take my friend. But I need to know that going in to mentally prepare myself. My life is shit enough. I don't want my books to be shit. Which is why
maybe you should stay away from urban fantasy and head to the happily ever after genre.
Yes.
PNR. We've come full circle.
I'll get you some really good PNR recs that are basically urban fantasy, but with a really happy after.
I don't like them when they turn porn. I don't want porn. Well, when I want porn, I want porn. But when I read one of these, it's not what I'm looking for. I want to be able to read it in public without blushing.
That restricts it, but but that's only because of the type of books I read. To be fair, there's plenty out there. It's just my preference.
My preference is being a horn dog. That's the problem.
My problem is that I'm a huge lover for reverse harem novels. It's now my favorite pair because obviously it's pairing because they can be anything. Literally, they can be the same as anything else. Like that, you've got MF, you've got gay, and you've got reverse harem, and I love them. But obviously, there's a lot of sex in them. When you've got 5 boyfriends,
you have to make the time, you know.
Make the time, yeah, definitely. But yeah, there's some good ones out there. I can definitely find some that are less. Maybe even some of them have only got maybe 1 or 2 scenes in a book, so depends on the book, depends on the author.
I like Jennifer Estep. I'm not sure how to say that properly. She has the Spider series, and she has a young adult, a couple of them, I think. Her books are really, really good. Overall plot line, like huge story arc. She's about to finish the series. Hers are fascinating.
That first one is called Spider's Bite?
I think so.
It's always checked out at the library. I'll have to get the ebook or something.
That's how I read them. The Spider.
You're back to like Goodreads, like looking at it. It's Jim Butcher, Patricia Briggs, Lana Andrews, Jim Butcher, Patricia Briggs, Jim Butcher, Patricia Briggs, Cassandra Clare. Those are all like the top. It's just Jim Butcher over and over again.
That's
So
amazing.
it's male-centric, y'all.
It's weird because it is majoritively read by women.
Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting that obviously women are still reading. Obviously, women are reading Jim Butcher as well. Obviously, because we don't discriminate in the same way. We don't go, oh, he's a female author, I'm not going to read that. I've come across quite a few guys who are like, I don't read female authors.
Yeah.
It's like, well, you're the ones missing out then.
Okay, I'll read all the good stories.
Good stuff, and you can have the same stuff repeated. There's some great male authors, obviously, but I read almost predominantly female authors.
And the anthologies, I feel like, don't help. The anthologies are all like, oh, here's some women. And then it's like, well, that's a great way for people to find authors of the opposite sex that they still enjoy. But that one anthology did have a Jim Butcher along with a Karen Chance and Strange Brew. And I'm trying to remember if it says Harry Dresden. I'm trying to remember if it's the story where he like wakes up dead or something and he shits out maggots. I'm just like, ew.
Ew.
Ew, why would men are gross? Why is that a plot point?
That's awful. I don't want to read that one.
But I feel like I was like, oh, I'll just stick to women.
I must have that on ebook because I don't have that on my shelf. Ouch. No, I love the anthologies like that because then you get to, that's a great way to find new authors. Like, oh, this is an interesting story. Let me look up more by them. Yay, new people.
And a lot of the ebooks of anthologies now are really cheap. They're like a quid and that's it, and you get tons out of it. Or they're included in Kindle Unlimited, some of them. So I always like that.
I know you use Kindle Unlimited, and I primarily get my urban fantasy through freebooksy.com. If anyone's interested, it's a newsletter daily of the free books that are on. I mean, I use Kindle, but like I think all of them. Like I've seen Kobo and Barnes and Nobles and all of them, and you can like pick which genres you want, and they'll email it to you. And that's where I get all of my urban fantasy, and it's all not very good, but it's urban fantasy. It's something to read, and sometimes you do win. But then, like, I'm kind of picky, if you can't tell, and it's kind of hit or miss for me for like everywhere.
It's hard to find good authors. If I find a good author, I read almost everything they've written.
Oh my God, yeah.
Because if they're good, I just want. I can read almost anything, especially if it's on KU because it's free. So it doesn't. I want to get my money's worth. I finally got Kindle Insights and I've read 402 books this year already.
Wow.
So I'm reading quite a lot. So I'll read anything really, but the good stuff I can probably count about a dozen authors that I will go back to and read the next thing that comes out.
Yeah, like my favorite from doing this for like 3 years. I mean, I haven't read all of the ones that I have bought in the last 3 years, but my favorite is a young adult author, and like consistently I've gone through her back catalog and I love like everything. And she is like urban fantasy, so yay.
What's the name?
Julianne Wicker. I can write it in here if I can find the chat.
I struggle with the chat because I'm on an iPad.
We should have a post on our CassieCon Facebook page so people can add recommendations in there as well, because I know I have trouble finding new authors and new books, and if they come recommended, I'm more likely to find them, look for them. And Definitely. So everybody is free to post in that too if you have some.
Okay. Yeah. Is it already made or do we have to make it?
Say that again?
Is it already made or do we have to make it?
We have to make it. I haven't posted that. I've been posting everything else.
I'll do it.
Okay, thank you.
I'll start with the ones that I've recommended here, and then we can grow from there. That was a list. I said I will include PNR that I think is essentially UF with a romance, just a stronger romance link. If I think it's as close to urban fantasy as that genre can be, I will include it. I'll just put a note next to the ones that are a bit muckier.
Yeah. I mean,
kind of mucky, a little bit mucky, not mucky at all.
There's a lot of crossover, and if you like one, you probably won't hate the other, so throw anything in there. Or just even other stuff to recommend.
Cool. I'll get that started. I think that's pretty much it from our points, unless you think of anything else, Rachel.
No, we covered pretty much
I think
everything.
we covered it in this aspect of chatting as well. So, if there's anything anyone else wants to bring up about the two genres, please do. The floor is open. Do you have any questions? Anything you want to ask me or Rachel? No?
I think we hit all the high points on my side. I don't know about anybody else.
Okay. I think that's everything. I think we can probably say goodbye. Well, thank you everybody for coming.
Thank you very much. It was very interesting. Obviously, I haven't hung out with you guys before, but it was really cool. Actually, very much interesting discussion. Don't often get to talk to girls about stuff.
Hell yeah.
Thank you for coming.
Yeah, thank you.
There are newbies. It's nice to see new faces. We want to get more people, like include more people, and make new friends essentially.
Yeah, talk to us about our favorite series.
We've still got a fair few to come, haven't we? We've got tomorrow we've got the fashion panel, which is Joanne and Rachel. And next week we've got is my Queen's Gambit one next week?
Yes.
It is.
We have intimate encounters or something like that. It's the NC-17 discussion. We have the quiz of doom, which is you, Matt.
Yeah. Oh God, yeah. I forgot about the quiz. The quiz is hard. I'm just going to tell you this, but it's fun.
It is fun. Next Sunday we have Queen's Gambit discussion and the monster panel, and then more stuff from there. But we have stuff almost every week. It is every weekend, but not always every day on the weekends. And we tried to make it time zone friendly because we know not everybody's in the same, but there's only so much we could do. We tried.
In Russia, so it's quite good, surprisingly enough. Evening here.
Awesome.
Yeah. Great. Nice to meet you all.
You too. Thank you.
We'll check out it.
Well, everybody.
Thank you so much.
I'm going to stop recording.